In a moment that would change everything, the air crackled with tension as my daughter stood before me, her face flushed with indignation. "You didn't fund my wedding," she cried out, her voice echoing with hurt and accusation, as if the weight of her dreams had suddenly collapsed around us. I felt the sting of her words, but beneath that sting lay a hidden truth, a staggering fortune of $50 million that I had kept secret for reasons I had never fully shared. In that charged moment, I realized the depths of misunderstanding that had woven through our lives, and the painful journey we were about to embark on together. Before we dive in, real quick, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments, I read every single one. And if this story hits you even a little, tap like, hit that subscribe, and share it with someone who needs. At the heart of a summer evening, the tension in the room was so thick it could be cut with a knife. We were gathered in the sunlit dining room of my childhood home, the air buzzing with the usual hum of family chatter. But then, without warning, my daughter Elise erupted, her voice sharp and accusing as she pointed a trembling finger at me. "You didn't fund my wedding," she spat out, eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and betrayal. The words struck me like a sudden gust of cold wind. I sat there silently, letting the accusation hang between us, feeling an unexpected calm settle over me. Elise's outburst wasn't just about money, it was a demand, a challenge, a desperate plea for recognition that I wasn't sure she fully understood. I looked around the room, my husband, my son, aunts and uncles, all frozen, watching the scene unfold. Yet, I remained quiet, my mind racing beneath the surface, hiding a truth that she could not yet grasp. Elise had always been a force of nature, ambitious and spirited. From the moment she announced her engagement, she dreamed of a grand wedding that would dazzle everyone, a day filled with lavish flowers, an opulent venue, and a guest list that seemed to grow with each retelling. Yet, behind her excitement, I had quietly wrestled with my own financial realities. Years of careful budgeting, sacrifices, and quiet struggle had built a foundation that few knew about, but it was not a fortune waiting to be spent on a single day. As Elise's voice echoed, accusing and hurt, my mind drifted back to the months leading up to this moment. I had watched her plan tirelessly, scrolling through endless Pinterest boards, meeting with wedding consultants who quoted figures that made my stomach twist. I had been there, offering support in small, meaningful ways, sewing a hem, making calls, helping with invitations, but the grand financial backing she expected had never been within my grasp. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I simply couldn't. The fracture between us was wider than I had ever imagined. Elise's resentment was rooted in assumptions and unmet expectations, while I hid behind a veil of silence, hoping my efforts in other areas would speak for themselves. But now, her words shattered that fragile balance, exposing the gulf between us. She continued, her voice rising with frustration, "You always say you support me, but when it comes to the wedding, you disappear. It's like you don't care about my happiness." I wanted to reach out, to explain the countless nights I stayed awake worrying about bills, about how to keep our household afloat without burdening her with adult worries. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I simply nodded, acknowledging her pain without confirming her accusations. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as memories of our shared past flickered through my mind. I remembered Elise as a little girl, her laughter filling this very space, her dreams sparkling in her eyes. Somewhere along the way, those dreams had grown larger than the reality we lived in, and the distance between us had grown with them. My husband, David, finally broke the silence. His voice was gentle but firm. "Elise, your mother has always supported you in ways you might not see. Maybe this is a chance for us all to talk openly about what's been going on." Elise's glare softened for a moment, but her hurt was far from healed. "I just wish I knew the truth, why you never told me the real story about money, about what you can and can't do." The truth was complicated. Our family's financial history was tangled with unspoken disappointments and silent sacrifices. For years, I had carried the weight of those burdens alone, afraid that sharing them would shatter Elise's dreams completely. I thought back to my own upbringing, the quiet lessons learned from my parents about prudence and endurance. They had taught me that money was not something to be flaunted or thrown around, but to be managed carefully, with respect and humility. Those lessons had shaped me into the woman I was: cautious, reserved, and often misunderstood. Elisa's wedding plans were a stark contrast to those values. To her, it was a celebration of joy and success; to me, it was a test of limits and realities. I had hoped she would understand that love and family mattered more than extravagance, but now, I realized how deeply she had been hurt by what she saw as neglect. As the evening wore on, the initial shock of her outburst gave way to a quieter tension. We moved to the living room, where the glow of the fireplace cast long shadows. Elise sat curled on the couch, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, while I sat across from her, searching for the right words. "I never wanted you to feel unsupported," I finally said, my voice low but steady. "But there are things you don't know, things I've kept to protect you." Her eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of anger and longing. "Then tell me," she whispered. "I don't want secrets between us." For a moment, I hesitated. The chasm between us felt enormous, built from years of silence and assumptions. Yet, beneath the surface, I knew this was a turning point. If we were to heal, I needed to share the story that had shaped our family's financial struggles and the choices I had made. As I began to speak, I told her about the early years after my parents passed, leaving me to manage what little inheritance there was, a modest sum that quickly dwindled against medical bills and debts. I spoke of the sacrifices David and I made to keep our home, to provide for the children, and to save for a future that often seemed just out of reach. Elise listened quietly, her expression softening as the layers of misunderstanding began to peel away. She saw, perhaps for the first time, the invisible battles that had shaped her mother's life and the quiet strength it took to endure them. But even as I spoke, I could see the shadow of disappointment in her eyes. The dreams she had held onto, of a fairy tale wedding funded by family wealth, were crumbling, replaced by a more complicated reality. The night deepened, and the conversation drifted into silence. Outside, the crickets sang a steady rhythm, a reminder that life moves on, even when hearts are heavy. I sat there, feeling the weight of the moment, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey we both had to take. The accusation had opened a door, a painful, necessary step toward understanding and, perhaps, forgiveness. As I watched Elise finally drift into a restless sleep that night, I wondered how we would bridge the gap between expectation and reality. How do you explain to the person you love most that sometimes, money is not just about what you have, but about what you don't? And when the silence breaks, can it ever be mended without leaving scars? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing for certain: this conversation was the first step towards something new. A fragile chance to rebuild trust, to share truths long hidden, and to find a way forward, together. And so, as the house settled into quiet darkness, I held on to a hope that beneath the anger and disappointment, the love between a mother and daughter could still find its way. In the days that followed that fraught evening, the silence between Elise and me stretched like an invisible wall, thick, cold, and stubbornly unmoving. She avoided the subject of the wedding funds altogether, but her resentment simmered beneath every word, every glance exchanged across the breakfast table. I could see it in the way she tightened her jaw when money came up, in the subtle sighs that escaped her lips when plans were discussed. Our conversations became strained, edged with unspoken tensions that neither of us dared to confront fully. Elisa's complaints, once rare and casual, grew more frequent and pointed. "It's not just about the money," she said one afternoon, voice sharp despite her attempt at calm. "It's about feeling like you don't believe I'm capable of handling this on my own. Like you never wanted to help me succeed." Her words cut deeper than any accusation. I wanted to explain the truth, the debts that still lurked in the corners of our family finances, the sacrifices David and I made quietly, the nights I stayed awake worrying about how to keep things afloat. But the weight of years of silence made the truth feel like a fragile shard, too easy to shatter if handled carelessly. I watched her wrestle with her feelings, her frustration growing as she tried to reconcile the mother she knew with the woman who seemed to be holding back. She accused me of withholding support, but I knew the reality was far more complicated. The truth wasn't just about what I could or couldn't give, it was about the stories we told ourselves, the assumptions we clung to, and the hopes that collided with the hard facts of life. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the windows, Elise and I sat in the living room, each lost in our own thoughts. She broke the silence, her voice quieter this time. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell me the real story about the money? About what's really going on?" I hesitated, the question unraveling the careful walls I had built over the years. "I thought I was protecting you," I admitted. Sometimes, the truth can weigh too heavily, especially when you're dreaming about a future full of promise. Elisa's eyes searched mine, a mixture of hurt and curiosity. But hiding it only made things worse. I felt like I was fighting against a shadow, never knowing what was real. I nodded, understanding more clearly than ever how deep the divide had grown. Our family history was marked by struggles that had been swept under the rug, debts that swallowed paychecks, medical bills that drained savings, and opportunities sacrificed to keep the household running. None of it was easy to share, especially with a daughter who deserved to dream without limits. As we spoke, memories surfaced, the quiet dinners where I calculated every expense, the pauses in conversation when money was mentioned, the subtle ways I tried to shield Elise from worry. I realized that my silence had created a gap, a space where assumptions took root and grew into resentment. Elise, for her part, revealed the pressure she felt from her social circle, the expectations that hovered over her like a storm cloud. Weddings were not just ceremonies, they were statements, symbols of success and love. To her, the absence of financial support felt like a rejection, a failure not just of money, but of trust. Her frustration wasn't just with me, it was with the invisible forces that shaped our lives, the invisible boundaries that limited her dreams. I saw how she longed for validation, for the kind of security that only comes from knowing someone has your back no matter what. One afternoon, I found myself going through old photo albums, tracing the faces of our family through the years. There were pictures of simpler times, birthdays, holidays, quiet moments filled with laughter. I wondered how we had drifted so far from that place, how money and silence had woven a quiet tension into our story. I knew that to move forward, we needed more than conversations, we needed honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to see each other beyond the roles we had assigned. Elise needed to understand the reality of our financial struggles, but I also needed to hear her pain without defensiveness. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. One evening, Elise sat down beside me, holding a stack of bills and spreadsheets she had been compiling. "I want to understand," she said simply. "Not just the numbers, but everything. The debts, the sacrifices, the choices you made for us." I took a deep breath and began to share the hidden chapters of our family's financial story, the medical emergencies that wiped out savings, the job losses that forced us to tighten our belts, the dreams we had set aside to keep the family stable. I spoke of David's quiet resilience and my own determination to protect our children from the harshest realities. As the truth unfolded, I saw a shift in Elisa's expression. The anger softened, replaced by a tentative empathy. She realized that our struggles were not failures but battles fought with courage and love. Yet, even with this understanding, the tension lingered. Our conversations were still punctuated by moments of frustration, Elisa's desire to break free from the past clashing with the constraints we faced. She questioned every expense, every decision, trying to reconcile her dreams with our limitations. I admitted to feeling torn between wanting to support her fully and fearing the consequences of overextending ourselves. "It's a delicate balance," I told her. "One wrong step, and everything could unravel." Despite the challenges, a fragile bridge began to form between us, built not on assumptions or accusations, but on shared truths and the willingness to face uncomfortable realities together. One night, as we sat side by side, Elise reached out and took my hand. "I don't want to keep fighting," she said softly. I want us to be honest, even if it's hard. That simple gesture, a touch, a willingness to connect, felt like a small victory in a long battle. It was a reminder that beneath the anger and disappointment, love still pulsed strong, waiting to heal the wounds. But even as we took these tentative steps toward understanding, I knew the road ahead would be difficult. The wounds from years of silence and misunderstanding would not disappear overnight. We still had to navigate the complexities of money and expectations, dreams and realities. And there was another truth lurking beneath the surface, one I wasn't yet ready to reveal, a secret that would challenge everything Elise thought she knew about our family's wealth and my role in it. For now, though, we sat together in the quiet room, two women bound by blood and history, trying to find a way forward through the tangled web of love, disappointment, and hope. Weeks passed, and the strained distance between Elise and me began to shift, though not in ways either of us expected. The conversations we shared had peeled back layers of misunderstanding, but beneath those layers lay a deeper truth, one I had been guarding for years, uncertain of when or how to share it. The secret that would change everything was no longer a burden I could carry alone. It began one quiet afternoon when Elise, now less guarded, asked me directly, "Mom, is there more? Something you're not telling me about the money?" Her voice was gentle, but the question hung heavy in the air. I felt the weight of years pressing down on me, the moment of revelation finally at hand. I took her hand, steadying myself. "There is something," I admitted. "Something I've kept hidden because I wanted to protect you, and perhaps because I wasn't ready to face it myself." I told her about the truth of our family's financial history, the one that contradicted everything she had believed. Contrary to the assumption that I had withheld family wealth or inheritance, the reality was that I had quietly built a fortune on my own, a nest egg amassed through decades of hard work, investment, and careful saving. More than $50 million, quietly tucked away over the years, untouched and unknown to almost everyone. Elisa's eyes widened in disbelief, shock mingling with confusion. "Why didn't you tell me? Why keep it a secret?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I sighed, the tension in my chest easing just slightly as I shared the story of my journey. I spoke of the years I spent working multiple jobs, investing wisely, and living frugally, all while maintaining the appearance of a modest, struggling family. The money had never been an inheritance, it was the product of my resilience and sacrifice. I had kept it hidden because I feared it might change how she saw me, or that it would create expectations I couldn't meet. Elise sat back, her mind racing to reconcile the image of the mother she knew with this new, powerful truth. The woman who had seemed so limited by circumstance was, in fact, a quiet force of determination and success. The realization shattered the narrative she had built, that I had withheld support out of neglect or indifference. As I watched her process the revelation, I saw a flicker of understanding begin to emerge. "I thought you had something to hide," she confessed. "But now I see it was more about protecting me, and maybe protecting yourself." "Yes," I said softly. "But I also see now that the secrecy created barriers between us, barriers I never wanted." Our conversation stretched late into the night, as Elise asked questions about the investments, the sacrifices, and the reasons behind my choices. I explained how I had prioritized stability and security, believing that the money might be needed for emergencies, for our future, or to ensure that the family would never face hardship again. She listened intently, the anger and resentment that had once clouded her eyes slowly giving way to admiration and respect. The daughter who had accused me of withholding support now saw the complexity of the decisions I had made, choices made not from selfishness, but from love and responsibility. Yet, this revelation also brought new challenges. Elise struggled with the idea that such wealth had been kept secret, that the dreams she had held for her wedding, and for her own future, had been shaped by an incomplete story. She wrestled with feelings of betrayal, not because I had money, but because she had been excluded from the truth. "I don't know how to feel," she admitted one day, her voice raw. "On one hand, I'm proud of you. On the other, I feel like I've been living a lie. I nodded, understanding the complexity of her emotions. It's okay to feel conflicted, I said. Truth can be messy. But I want you to know that nothing has changed about my love for you or my desire to support you. With this newfound honesty, the dynamic between us began to shift. Elise started to see me not just as a mother caught in financial hardship, but as a woman who had fought her own battles and won. She began to appreciate the quiet strength behind my stoic exterior and the depth of sacrifice that my silence had concealed. Over the following weeks, we talked openly about her wedding plans again, but this time with a new understanding. Elise realized that her dreams could be shaped by more than just money, they could be built on trust, transparency, and the shared history that connected us. I helped her see that financial support was just one part of love, and that sometimes, the greatest gift was the willingness to be honest, even when the truth was difficult. She, in turn, began to open up about her own hopes and fears, allowing me to support her in ways that went beyond the material. But beneath this fragile reconciliation, I knew there were still unspoken questions about how we moved forward with the wealth I had kept hidden, about the expectations that might arise now that the truth was out. Would Elise want to rely on that money? Could I let go of the control I had maintained for so long? One afternoon, as we sat together reviewing wedding budgets with a newfound clarity, Elise looked at me and said, "Mom, I want us to use this, the money, not to live beyond our means, but to build something real. For the wedding, yes, but also for our future." Her words struck a chord deep inside me. It was the first time she had acknowledged the wealth not as a threat, but as a tool, a chance for us to redefine what family support meant. I realized then that the hidden fortune was not just about money, it was about trust and the legacy I wanted to leave her. It was about breaking the cycle of silence and misunderstanding that had shadowed our lives. In that moment, I made a silent promise to myself, to be open, to share not just the wealth, but the story behind it, to let Elise see not just the mother who struggled, but the woman who fought, saved, and preserved a future for her family. As we planned together, laughter returned to our conversations, and the weight of secrecy began to lift. Elise's vision for her wedding transformed, no longer a symbol of what was lacking, but a celebration of resilience, honesty, and the strength we found in facing the truth. Yet, even as this chapter closed, I knew our journey was far from over. The revelation had opened a door, but beyond it lay new challenges, questions of trust, expectations, and how we rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of truth. For now, though, we sat side by side, united by the shared knowledge that sometimes, the greatest wealth lies not in money, but in the courage to reveal the truths we keep hidden the longest. The moment to confront Elise with the full truth came quietly, without fanfare, on a rainy Saturday afternoon. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the soft tapping of raindrops against the window providing a steady rhythm to the conversation that was about to unfold. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that settles when unspoken things finally find their voice. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew would be difficult but necessary. "Elise," I began, my voice steady but gentle, "there's something more I need to tell you, something that might change the way you see everything we've talked about so far." Her eyes locked onto mine, a flicker of curiosity mixed with apprehension. "What is it?" she asked quietly, leaning forward slightly, as if preparing herself. I reached across the table and took her hand, grounding myself in the connection between us. "The truth is, I never had any inheritance or family fortune to fund your wedding. The money you thought I was withholding, it doesn't exist." Her brow furrowed, confusion washing over her face. "But you said you had savings, a fortune you built yourself?" "Yes," I said, nodding slowly. "I worked hard and saved wisely over the years, but it wasn't handed down to me. I didn't have a trust fund or a secret bank account waiting to be tapped. Every dollar was earned through sacrifice, through years of careful choices and sometimes painful decisions." Elise's expression shifted, a mixture of relief and disbelief. "So, you're saying that all this time, I thought there was this hidden pot of gold, but it was just you?" I smiled sadly. Exactly. I've never wanted to hide anything from you, but I also wanted you to understand that money isn't the measure of love or support. I wanted you to know that what matters is the effort, the commitment, and the sacrifices we make for each other. Her fingers tightened around mine, and for a moment, the tension between us softened. But then, the weight of the revelation settled in, and her voice trembled with raw emotion. I don't know how to feel. Part of me is angry that you didn't tell me sooner. Another part feels ashamed for assuming things about you. I nodded, understanding the complexity of her emotions. It's okay to feel that way. I've carried the burden of silence for too long, hoping to protect you from disappointment. But in doing so, I realize I may have built walls where bridges should have been. Elise looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been so focused on what I thought was missing that I didn't see all you've done. I was blinded by assumptions and expectations. We sat in silence for a moment, the rain outside mirroring the quiet cleansing happening between us. Then, with a tentative smile, she said, I want to understand everything now, the real story behind the money, the sacrifices, the decisions. I began to share the full scope of our financial reality, the medical bills that wiped out savings, the unexpected setbacks that forced us to tighten our belts, the delicate balance between supporting the family and preserving what little we had. I spoke of the nights I worked late, the investments that grew slowly but surely, and the quiet determination that kept me going. As I spoke, I saw a transformation in Elisa's eyes. The anger and resentment that once clouded her gaze gave way to empathy and respect. She began to see me not just as a mother caught in hardship, but as a woman who had weathered storms with quiet strength. But the conversation also brought to light the distance that had grown between us, the misunderstandings that had festered in silence. Elise admitted how her assumptions about money had shaped her expectations, and how those expectations had left her feeling unsupported and alone. I confessed my own fears, the fear that sharing too much would burden her, that revealing our struggles would shatter her dreams. We acknowledged the delicate dance we had both been performing, trying to protect each other while building walls instead of bridges. That afternoon became a turning point. We agreed to be honest with each other moving forward, to share not just the numbers but the feelings behind them. Elise promised to put aside assumptions and listen with an open heart, while I vowed to be transparent and vulnerable, even when it was uncomfortable. With this new understanding, we began to explore ways to support Elisa's wedding plans realistically, balancing dreams with the financial realities we faced. We talked about priorities, about what truly mattered, and about how to create a celebration that reflected love rather than extravagance. Elisa's frustration didn't vanish overnight, but it softened as she realized that support isn't always about money, sometimes it's about presence, honesty, and shared dreams. For the first time in a long while, we were on the same side, working together instead of apart. Yet, beneath the surface, I knew there were still challenges ahead. The wounds from years of silence wouldn't heal easily, and the road to rebuilding trust would be slow and steady. We had opened a door, but now we had to walk through it together. That evening, as the rain eased and the sky cleared, I felt a fragile hope take root. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, a clearing of the air that allowed us to breathe again. We had faced the truth, and in doing so, we had taken the first steps toward healing. As I looked at Elise, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the kitchen light, I wondered what the future held. Could we rebuild what had been broken? Could we create a new story, one built on honesty, understanding, and love? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew the path forward would be marked by courage and openness. And for now, that was enough. Months had passed since that pivotal conversation, and slowly, the wounds between Elise and me began to heal. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, no grand gestures or sudden epiphanies, but a quiet, gradual shift born from the willingness to be honest and to listen. The tension that once filled our home had softened into an atmosphere of tentative understanding. Elise started to see beyond her previous assumptions, recognizing the sacrifices I had made in silence. She began to appreciate the complexity of our family's journey, understanding that love isn't always measured in dollars, but in the choices we make for each other every day. Our conversations became more open, less guarded, and I sensed a new respect growing between us, fragile but real. One afternoon, as we sat together planning the final details of her wedding, she looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen in months. "Mom, I want to thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for the money or the support, but for being honest with me. It means more than I can say." Her words touched me deeply, a balm to the aches of the past. I realized then that the greatest gift we could give each other was not financial security, but trust and understanding. The barriers built by years of silence were crumbling, replaced by a foundation of mutual respect. In the weeks that followed, I reflected on the lessons this journey had taught me. I saw how assumptions and unspoken expectations could poison even the closest relationships. I understood that true wealth lies not in hidden fortunes, but in the courage to face uncomfortable truths and to share them with those we love. Elise, too, grew in ways I hadn't anticipated. She began to embrace a new perspective on success and happiness, one that valued authenticity over appearances. Her wedding became a celebration not just of love, but of resilience and honesty, a testament to the strength we found in facing our challenges together. Our family, once fractured by misunderstanding, slowly knit itself back together. Conversations flowed more freely, laughter returned to our gatherings, and the shadows of resentment faded into memories. The journey had been difficult, but it had brought us closer than we had ever been. And as life moved forward, I found myself wondering how many other families carried similar burdens, how many silences hid stories of sacrifice and love, waiting to be uncovered. I thought about the power of honesty and the fragile beauty of forgiveness. Now, I ask you, have you faced moments where truth felt too heavy to bear? Have you experienced the pain of misunderstanding within your own family? How did you find your way back to trust? Share your stories below. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is speak our truth and listen with open hearts. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.